All right, part two. So moving on. So I went ahead and put the intake manifold on. There's a specific torque sequence. This is very time consuming. This took about 45 minutes to an hour to put on. So make sure you torque it to spec in the sequence that Nissan wants you to do it. Connected all the hoses. A couple of these I replaced. This is pretty common back here for this one to start leaking. So that's replaced. These two are vacuum. And one of them's not even being used right now. It's capped off over here. I didn't replace the coolant hoses because they feel fine, and I'm fairly certain I can get to them. These are super expensive from Nissan anyway, so I will just replace those as needed. They're fine though, they're not going to leak. Some of the vacuum tubing I replaced. I still got to mount the water pump, but before I do all that, last week when I was assembling this engine, I fucked up and over torqued the ARP rod bolts. Here it is, me thinking that there's your bolt 7/16 identification, 7/16 bolt head, ARP 2000, cool. So I went to 75 foot-pounds and they actually stretched to about 65 thousandths because I have that ARP bolt stretch gauge right here. Awesome tool, make sure you get one. Anyways, so I was about to put the pan on and I started looking over and I was like, wait, they're a 3/8 bolt with a 7/16 head to 43 foot-pounds. And right here on the fucking box, if I would have read it, torque to 43 foot-pounds. So those bolts are no good. I didn't measure them before ARP wants you to. So I just had, that was a $200 mistake. Actually, it was like $250 because I overnighted some from Summit. And I got them in. These are the new ones. I'm going to go ahead and replace them, torque them to the correct spec, and I'm going to make sure that they stretch to the proper length with that gauge, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the oil pan on and turn this bitch upside down, and should be good to go here. I can start moving on. I had to wait on that. That cost me 4 days, so over the weekend, because originally I had ordered some from Jegs overnight and they were the incorrect ones, and that was on Friday. So I had to call Eagle yesterday, which was Monday, to get the correct part number, and then order them last night through Summit, and they are here. So I'm going to change out all these rod bolts, torque them to the correct spec. I don't know, probably won't take a video of it just because you guys will know how to do that. It's not that difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so new rod bolts are in. They're torqued. So I did the bolt stretch method versus the torquing method. Okay, and like I said before, so this is the correct torque and bolt stretch. I was using this one, the 7/16 ARP 2000, which was 75 foot-pounds, and there's your stretch. One thing I noticed is I was having to torque these rod bolts to 60 foot-pounds. Keep in mind the recommended torque is 43. Okay, so I was having to go to 60 foot-pounds to get the proper stretch of 55 thousandths. They're all at 55 thousandths. So I called up Eagle to ask them about that, and they're like, use one or the other. Like, don't worry about the torque if you're doing the bolt stretch method. That is the preferred way to get the proper preload on the actual ARP rod bolts. And just to be sure there wasn't something wrong with my torque wrench, I have this torque meter on here, and it was 59.6 to 60.3 with a torque setting of 60. So I knew the torque wrench was fine. Wasn't anything wrong with the torque wrench. So they're all pretty much at 60 foot-pounds. So they are going to be good to go. I got to put the I don't know the proper terminology for it, the plates that go on here, the splash plates I think is what they're called, and then I'm going to turn the engine over, put that container under it, and pour a bunch of oil down, just as one last final, if there's anything in there to get it out, hopefully, and then I'm going to put some sealant around here, take the tape off obviously, and put some sealant around here. I am using actual Nissan sealant. This is the recommended stuff. This is the stuff that was on from the factory. I'm sure the part numbers have changed over time, but this is what you want to use. Obviously it's good shit, so I don't want to be using the Permatex good stuff too, but I'd rather just get the name brand stuff from Nissan, the stuff they recommend for the critical components, because I don't want this leaking in 2 years. So I'll do that. There is a torque sequence on this. I'll bring it up, and you want to torque this down so it's all flush and good to go. I also need to put the oil pump on. I will do that before I put the pan on, just so we have one continuous bead going over here of sealant. This is the oil pump. I did shim the spring inside of here with a 1mm shim. I did not do that to get more pressure. I did that to help the 25-year-old spring, well it's 27 now, that's in here, just give it that extra push. All the screws have been Loctited. I Loctited the shit out of them to the point to where Loctite was coming out of the actual heads up here, so those are not backing off. I want to say the torque was like 7 foot-pounds. So these are all torqued to spec. The spool import gears are in here. Billet gears, they have an N1 profile on them. So what that's going to do is provide more flow. I'm not going to get, this is not an N1 pump, just the gears have the N1 profile, so I'll just get a little bit more flow. I'm not too concerned about pressure. I'm more worried about flow than I am pressure. People get caught up on pressure. Pressure is just resistance in the system. So I mean, meaning if your bearings are tight or whatever, you're going to have more pressure. As long as the pump, at some point pressure will drop off if the pump loses flow. So with this N1 profile, I should have more flow, hence I should have better pressure up top where we need it. And with the oil head restrictor in there, I should have no issues with over oiling the head unless I take this thing out to the track and I'm at 7,000 RPM for straight 20 minutes, which I do not intend to do anyways. Another thing to point out is always make sure, before you go putting shit together, always make sure this turns over freely without any binding. You should have no odd noises, no binding or anything. So this one turns over freely. I have the spark plugs out, obviously. I'm going to throw some oil in here just one last time to get in between the actual rod and crank itself. All right, so before I put this oil pan on, the oil pump's on, that's all torqued. I gave the wrong spec for the oil pump bolts in the back. It's like 4 foot-pound, not 8. Anyways, so I threw a bunch of oil in this hole to help fill up the galleries that feed the mains and then the one going up to the head. It's receding as I fill it because it's the engine's sloped down. It's going into the head, but it's fine. As long as I got some oil in there, it's good to go. I primed the feed line. That's the feed coming from the pump. So you can see it right there. That's what goes into your filter and then it goes back down. My setup, it's going out of here through the oil cooler and then it's going back through the oil filter and then back through here. So I got a new gasket. It's all OEM. I did spray some Hylamol around there only because there's some imperfections in the metal. I don't know if you get minor imperfections. So I just don't want to have any issues with that sealing. Anyways, there's an O-ring in here, right there, inside of there. Let me try to get some better light here. There you go. See it? Critical you guys replace that. That is what seats around that nub that's poking out. So if this is a bad O-ring or you don't replace it or you forget to put it in, you're going to have oil bypassing the oil filter. It'll go straight from the oil pump right back into itself, into the motor. So replace that O-ring. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put this on now. All right, going to have the oil pan put on now. So this is the Tomy baffle plate. It's a nice piece. That's all in there, ready to go. Oil pan's clean. Oil holes have been drilled over here. There's 4 of them, or 5 or 6 or something like that. Those have been enlarged per Tomy's instructions. So I'm going to throw some sealant on the block and then have my wife help me put this thing on. The baffle plates and the strainer have already been installed and torqued. There's a new O-ring on here. There's the part number for the O-ring. Kind of tricky getting it on and getting it to stay, but that'll be it. All right, I'm going to get on this. All right, oil pan on. Everything's torqued. Had to be quick because this stuff is already, it's pretty much set. Not dry, but it's set up, you know. So you want to have everything torqued down pretty quickly. Okay, what's next? Next, I'm going to do this water pump while I still have that sealant somewhat wet. I don't want all that to dry, so I'm going to go ahead and apply some sealant to this water pump, clean this face off, and then slap it on. There is no paper gasket for this thing. It wants you to apply a continuous bead of sealant and install within 5 minutes. This is an OEM Nissan water pump. I did have to do the modification here, fill it with JB Weld, just because I don't have that gap in there. Nissan does still make the actual water pump for the R32. I think that's an R34 and up water pump. It is not an N1 water pump. I don't want an N1 water pump because there's less splines. You're gonna get less flow at idle. It's fucking stupid. If you have a track car, get an N1 pump. You got a street car, stay with the OEM pump. No reason to get an N1. Anyways, ran over. So yeah, so I had to do that modification so it doesn't go into the water jacket. Put some sealant on here and slap it on. Water pump's on. Everything's torqued on that. I'm going to spin this block back over and I need to start putting the cams in that are over there, along with all the buckets and etc. etc. I just got a phone call from the engine shop. So my crank that's in Colorado is good. So the guy is a well-known engine builder, said he can just polish out the #1 journal along with all the other journals and it'll be fine. And he's going to machine the crank collar on it. So I'll have an extra crankshaft. I'm probably going to build the other block that's over there, stock everything. The stock pistons and rods that rod of this, so that'll be a stock bore block. I'll replace the piston rings and throw some standard bearings in it, standard head gasket, and just have that chilling in the corner. There's a few people here in Wichita, Kansas with stock GTRs, so when their motors take a shit, maybe I can sell it and recoup some of the money from this fortune build that this just cost me. So alright, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Alright, let me apologize with saying I'm sorry, but I went into get shit done mode yesterday. I was out here until 1 in the morning and I just got it done. Cams are all in, basically everything's in. I'm gonna go ahead and mate this to the transmission after I put the clutch on over there and whatnot. Let's see here. So these are the factory lift points. There's one here and the other one's over here in the front. Apparently you can just lift the motor with those, but I do not trust that with that extra 175 pound transmission. So hopefully I don't regret doing this, but I added a lift point here and I made one up off the power steering bracket here just as extra support. The chain is kind of touching this cover here and here, but I'm getting these repowder coated so I can get, I don't care. I'd rather have the safety factor than a couple of scratches in my cover, because if I drop this thing on the car, it's gonna be done, because it's gonna be, this thing's upwards of 800 pounds. Yeah, as you can see, like I said, I was out here until 1 in the morning. This place is a freaking mess now. I need to take a moment and pick all this up. I am gonna take off the front bumper. Like I even made a note, remove front bumper. So I'm gonna take off the front bumper just so the front portion of the engine stand doesn't touch it. And I need to flush the oil cooler. I got a union I'm gonna put in here, and I got a Mighty Vac, just circulate some new oil through it to get all the old shit out. And I will press with mating that up and then hopefully having this thing installed sometime today. I probably won't have it running today. What's today, Wednesday? Yeah, I don't think I'll have it running today. There's still a lot to do. I gotta connect everything, and this is an alternator off of a GTO, an 04 GTO. I think it's 110 amps, so just a little bit over factory. There was nothing wrong with my factory alternator, but you hear stories of guys like when these things, the regulator in the back, which you can't replace by the way, that thing right there inside there, goes bad and causes a electrical short. I guess you blow the factory inline fuse, which is somewhere over here, and then it causes issues with the cluster in there. I didn't want to have to deal with that, so I figured to help. That's probably not even putting out 90 amps anymore. Who knows? It's probably somewhere around like 80. I don't know. Anyways, to help out the fuel pump in the future and just get up with current times, I went ahead and bought this kit. It was like 175 bucks for the brackets, the bolts, and then the alternator was on eBay for like $110. And then I got Tomy cam gears in there. I went ahead and defaulted them to +4 advance. That's crankshaft degrees, so just 2 notches on the gear. And then 1 notch retarded on the exhaust, so -2 on the exhaust. So +4 intake, -4 exhaust. I'll start there and see how she does. That should lower the power band and help with like turbo spool up. It should drop it by like 300-400 RPM, which would be nice with these turbos because they're journal bearing. They're not ball bearing, but they are like equivalent for you GTR guys to 2860-5s, the ball bearing Garrett's. So these are just cheaper version, much more simpler. There's no coolant. It's just oil fed, which is awesome. I don't have to deal with coolant BS. So this starter, again, nothing wrong with the starter, just doing preventative maintenance, but there's a article online, or someone posted in like a blog. I took this thing completely apart, the solenoid off, the starter, everything out, the mechanism. I cleaned everything. I cleaned the mechanism right here that the solenoid powers. Re-greased it and cleaned all the crap out of here just so I don't have any issues with it down the road, because this thing's a pain in the butt to get out. Alright, man, it's getting hot in here. Anyways, alright, here's where I'm at. I'm going to try to go in with the entire thing. Like I said, I'm hoping that holds. I mean, the majority of the tension is on that one right now. There's been people that have pulled these motors out as an assembly, just using the factory mount here and the other one over there. So I got 4 points right now. So yeah, I got the flywheel and clutch on, but I forgot to put that backing plate on. There's this backing plate right here. So make sure you guys put that on. I had to pull everything back off again. 4 hours to get that in. I was trying for the last 2.5 hours to get this engine mount seated, because this engine was lopsided. It was sitting up like this. So I had to stick a jack under the diff to get this side up a little bit, and then trying to wiggle it and yank on it and push it. Freaking, I have the transmission jack under, you can't really see it, transmission jack under the transmission, trying to get all that in, and the starter's all wired in, alternator's wired in, everything's connected. Still got to connect the transmission stuff, put in the fuel lines, and start buttoning everything back up. It's probably not going to happen tonight. I'll come back out tomorrow because I'm freaking beat. I'm going to go have a beer. I'm sure the neighbors are like, what the fuck is going on over there? Because I've been chucking tools and screaming at this thing. I never want to do this again. I say that now. I probably would do it again, but yeah, it did go in as one. That really wasn't an issue. If you want to do it as a lump, you need to get one of these. You can't just use a 4-point tied to this, or tied to the hook on the hoist. You got to have one of those, because without that it would have never happened, because that's how you level out the engine. Alright guys, out here next day, I did go ahead and get the engine in. Everything's bolted in, all the maps are hooked up. I just did the starter way of priming the oil system. It took about 20 seconds and I got 30 psi at like 300 RPM or however much the starter's turning over, so that's excellent, that's good. Coolant's in. I'm going to go ahead and connect this cam angle sensor and put these spark plugs back in. And by the way, whenever you guys want to have no spark and no fuel, just disconnect the cam angle sensor. It's that easy, and it cuts out spark and fuel. I still need to put the exhaust in, and I still need to put the transmission cross member in so I can get that jack out of there, and then I'm going to start this thing. Make sure nothing's leaking, and then I'll go ahead and put the CV axles in and take it out for a test drive, maybe. So another thing I just decided to do was compression test it on just one of the random cylinders. I did cylinder 2. 5 revolutions. I heard it pump up 5 times, and I'm already at 150 on a brand new motor, and the rings haven't even seated. So that is a damn good sign, especially with the ring end gaps that I have set a little bit looser than factory. So it's good. All right, I got the exhaust on. The drive shaft still need to be put on, but not too worried about that right now. But we're ready to fire this thing, so I'm gonna put the camera over here, and hopefully everything goes good. She's running good. Sounds good. Got no excessive blow-by right now, which is good. So yeah, I'm gonna let this thing warm up and check for leaks, and I'll let you guys know what happens. Alright, so we've been running for about 15 minutes. I got some good news and I got some bad news. The good news is it's running good. Oil pressure is good, hot oil pressure. This is on 10W30. I will be running at 10W40, so it'll be slightly higher, maybe by 3 to 4 psi, so that's good. Coolant and all that shit's good. EGT's blinking because I don't have it connected. Definitely needs tune because I'm super lean, but that's cool because I advanced the camshafts. Alright, here's the bad news. I guess when I was installing the engine, I nicked the, what is it, the fucking Hikers shit. Let me get a light. That line right there, I nicked it. It's cut. Therefore, I am leaking power steering fluid. So fast forward a couple days. The day I showed you guys the line leaking, I got on the Facebook page and I had a guy named Eric. He sent it out. He got to the post office that day. So I went ahead and instead of removing the whole HICA system, I actually like it. A lot of people say just remove it because it'll kill you, but I don't know, man. Maybe their system's not bled, or I don't know, but I'm going to keep it as long as I can. If and when it does try to kill me, it's coming out, but I actually enjoy having it. I like the way it feels in the turns. But so this is the line that I nicked right there, so that's where it was leaking. This was not fun, not easy to replace. I pretty much had to take all this shit out again, all the piping, the battery had to come out, and it took me about an hour and a half, but it's done now. So I'm going to start this thing up. I'm going to bleed the power steering system, which is easy, and then I'm going to bleed the HICA system, which there's a big procedure for it in the factory service manual. You got to hit like the brake pedal, turn the key on and off, do a bunch of shit. So it'll probably be good. It probably needs to be bled anyways. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'm going to set the base timing, and then we're going to go for a test drive. All right, cleaned up the garage a little bit. Still got a lot of oil I got to get off. Let's go for a drive. I know it looks like I'm leaking a bunch of stuff underneath the car, but I just flushed it with some degreaser and water just to kind of flush out residual oil. But let's go for a drive. Alright guys, so I've been driving for a little bit. Probably got about like 20 minutes on. I just wanted to make sure everything was good, so I pulled over a few times just to make sure I wasn't leaking anything, wasn't burning oil or whatnot. Everything is doing good. Oil pressure is good. I'm using the 10W30 braking oil right now and at 190 degree Fahrenheit. Obviously, I am at 30 PSI. So we are good. So yep, if anything happens, I'll update it. Stay tuned for future videos. I am deploying soon, so there'll probably be a long break again. But until next time, thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys soon.